Welcome to the CouchScouts podcast. We provide league-winning analysis, advice, and tools to help you dominate your league and build a dynasty. Scout, draft, win. Here's your host, Matt Cooper.
Welcome to tonight's episode of the CouchScouts podcast. I'm your host, Matt Cooper. With me is my co-host, Matt Jackson.
What's going on, man?
Doing pretty good. We are without Rupert tonight. He is at his kid's recital, some kind of recital. So, good. Shout out Rupert for being a good dad. And he may be able to join us on the bonus podcast later for those of you guys that are members to the site. But on this episode of the podcast, we are going to be continuing our Inside the Prospect series. Tonight, we're going to be discussing Tet Mcmillian, wide receiver out of Arizona. He is listed at 6'5", 212 pounds. He is a junior, early declare, was number 4 wide receiver in his recruiting class, according to recruiting rankings coming in out of high school. And he led all true freshmen nationally with 702 yards on 39 receptions with 8 touchdowns as a true freshman. And he only built from there. He had 2 straight 1,300-plus yard receiving seasons in 2023 and 2024, and really has just put up about as good of a statistical production profile as you could ask for a prospect coming into the NFL. So excited to talk about him tonight. He's kind of the consensus wide receiver 1 in the class. I don't know a lot of people suggesting that it's anyone different. So yeah, I'm excited to dig into this and just see where we landed in terms of the tape. Does the tape match up with all of the statistical accolades that I just read off? And do we think he's worthy of that title of 101 or not? He's not the 101, but wide receiver number 1, 102 for a lot of people, even in Superflex drafts. A lot of people talking about him as a top 10 NFL draft selection. So, excited to get into all of that. So, Jackson, you got any preliminary thoughts here before we jump in?
No, I was really excited to dive into his tape. You hear, I don't know, I'd always been a Devy guy, heard a lot about Tet Mcmillian, and he's somebody that has been on my radar for a while, but never really watched much tape until recently. So I'm excited to talk about some of the things that we found, and it might even be some hot takes here. Who knows?
Well, it's easy to not watch tape when, especially if you're relying on kind of a live watch and you live on the East Coast and he's playing for what was
10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night.
Formerly Pac-12, rest in peace. But yeah, he was playing pretty late at night, and so I've watched some of him and actually cut a decent amount of his tape for the Dynasty Nerds film room. So it was a little bit less fresh for me than it was you. I mean, this was for you. It was like kind of the first time really diving in. So, let's get right into it. And so this is our first time this year talking about the wide receiver position. We've done 2 running back episodes, and so I think it's worth talking a little bit of wide receiver theory on the front end. Like, what are we looking for when we're scouting wide receivers? Yeah. And I'll just say that some of the traits, I'll run through some of the traits we're going to be talking about on tonight's show. We're going to talk about his release and his route running. We're going to talk about his hands, his contested catch ability, catch radius, body control. You could kind of sum all those up into the phrase ball skills. Like, how good is he when the ball is in the air, going up and making that catch in different situations. We're going to talk about his athleticism, size, speed, quickness, burst, all of that type of stuff, his yards after the catch ability. So those are some of the traits that we're going to be going over and what we noticed on film. And obviously, if you've been listening for a while, we sit down and we watch all 22 coaches tape where you can see the whole route, whether he gets targeted or not. That's really important. Every snap, not just the highlight, only the plays where he, earned a target. Like, it's every snap that he's out there, the run blocking, the whole deal. So that's part of our process. Each of us watched, I believe it was 6 games on Tet Mcmillian as part of this evaluation process. And we gave film grades. So we assigned grades to each of these categories with a scale that's going to spit out a total grade for us on him as a player. So just a little bit of background into our process as you're listening to us talk about that. And I will say too that not every attribute is weighted evenly in terms of what spits out on our final grade. So our philosophy in terms of scouting wide receivers specifically is we think the release and the route running is the most important. You have to get open to earn targets, and targets lead to fantasy points, especially in PPR leagues where even just catching the ball on a short pass is going to get you fantasy points if you do that on a consistent basis. So we rate release and route running the heaviest, followed by those ball skills. First job is get open, second job is catch the ball, and then kind of last as a cherry on top is yards after catch ability. And we believe that athleticism plays into the whole picture on all of those things. So how twitchy you are is going to affect how much separation you get in and out of your breaks. How fast you are is going to determine how much separation you get on a go route down the field. Verticality is going to affect your ability to go up and get a jump ball in traffic, like size and strength, all of that. And so we're looking for functional athleticism, not just something that you can do in tights at the combine. And so when we're talking about athletic ability, we're talking about how does it translate into all of these other traits that we're talking about. So that was a lot of kind of preamble on the front end. But since it is our first receiver on the show, I thought it was worth going over all that. You got anything you would add there, Jackson?
No, I would just say, just to add, just like we talked about with the running backs, right? It's important to note our scale, right? So, like, if I were to go in and say, like, hey, Tet McMillian earned a 6, right, for this certain skill, that's average NFL level. Like, I think it's important to say that, like, normally when you're grading something 1 to 10, like a 6 is like it's but it's not great, like
Right.
average with every
Like
other
if
NFL.
you're taking a test in school, like a 60 is not a good grade, right?
Yeah, yeah, but it's different. It's different with our scoring system. So it's important to know if we say 6 or 7, like that's not necessarily a bad score.
Yeah, it's not saying he's terrible at this. It's just saying he's not like excelling in this or winning in this way. It's not like one of his strengths necessarily. So, yeah, and I don't think we're going to be talking about a lot of 6 and 7s when it comes to Tet
No,
McMillan. But
no, no,
let's
but
get into
that's
it.
it's a
So
non-issue. But
we'll start right off rip with the release and the route running, and these are kind of separate but related. So a release is, for those of you that don't know, he's at the line of scrimmage and he's being pressed. So the defender is up into his chest before the snap. And how does he get off against press coverage? Release is kind of what does he do with his feet, with his hand fighting, all that plays into his release against press coverage. And then the route running is kind of everything else. How does he do against finding the open spot against zone? How does he do manipulating at the stem of the route? Defensive manipulation, creating separation at the top of the route. How diverse is his route tree? Is he just running 2 or 3 routes, or is he variable in that way? So all of that kind of goes into the route running. And so these two things kind of hand in hand together create what I would call maybe a separation score if you were to combine the two, release and route running. So what did you see here, Jackson, from Tet McMillian?
yeah, so I'll start off by saying we listed it already. Tech McMillan currently right now is listed. This is pre-combine. Like we don't know how accurate these numbers are, but the team lists him at 6'5", 212 pounds. So he's a big-bodied X receiver. And I would say when it comes to release, especially, route running is good, but release especially, he plays like it, right? Like he has. I gave him a 4 when it came to his release package. 4 right now is average college level according to our grading system. Like he was not good at his release. Like he has, when I watched him, the 6 games that I watched, he has no release package. His feet look sloppy when he's going to try and release. Like there's nothing that he does when he's getting pressed that creates any type of separation when it comes to release package. It's just non-existent for him. Now, when it comes to route running, I think he was a great route runner, especially short to intermediate routes. There was one play where he was moving across the zone, went to go settle down in the zone on a little hook route, saw his quarterback was scrambling out. He saw the soft spot in the zone, continued forward, caught a pass for a long catch. So, I mean, I thought he was a great route runner. I thought he really did well in this. I gave him, let me look at it. I gave him gave him an 8 when it came to route running, which is great, right? I mean, that's great according to our scale, but man, his release package, it is just so subpar in my eyes.
Yeah, unfortunately, we saw the same thing here. And again, if you're maybe a new listener, we don't talk about this. Each watch separately, and you kind of get our live take on the show. We haven't. So we both separately came to the conclusion that his release is leaving a lot to be desired here. So you gave him a 4, I gave him a 5, a little bit better there, but it's still not a good score. And for route running, I also gave an 8. So we're in lockstep on that. I thought he didn't really fire his feet
Yeah.
against press coverage specifically. So when somebody's up against you and press like that, you want to kind of fire your feet so they're guessing which direction is he going to break out of, and then explode out of that and create some separation at that release point where you can then dust him off the line. There's some hand fighting involved, but in terms of like diamond release, jab step, like there's so many different moves that you can do against press coverage to get that defender off balance at the line of scrimmage. And I never really saw him execute any of those things. Like he just didn't have a bag that he could go to. It was like, I'm going to run fast in a straight line and try to bully you. And that was all that he did. It was like, I'm going to run straight into you and I'm going to dip my shoulder and I'm going to try to outrun you in a straight line. That was
Yeah.
it on the release. And it
Well,
was over and over and over again for 6 games. Like it's
yeah.
not like we're reacting to, oh, he had, because when you're 6'5", you get pressed a lot. When you're an X receiver, you get pressed a lot. So this is a big sample size. It's not like, oh, we saw him against press 2 or 3 times and now we're saying he's terrible at it. And no, it was over and over again. So this is a huge concern for me. His overall score, we're going to get to it, is still very good. He's a good player. I know right out the gate here, we are talking about his biggest weakness, and it's going to sound like we're dumping on Tet McMillian. But I just think for his archetype as a big-bodied X receiver, it is concerning that he uh, had so many issues against press.
Yeah. And I'll say, spoiler alert, like there's a lot of other stuff that we're going to talk about that was really, really good.
Mhm.
It just so happens that this is an area that he's not winning in,
Yeah.
even a little bit consistently.
And you mentioned the route running. You gave him an 8. I gave him an 8. That's a great score. Really, I think, particularly in the short to intermediate game, like I thought he was a physical route runner. He was great at hand fighting and kind of, his physicality. I think I gave him a 9 on physicality. I mean, he just very much, and I gave him a 9.5. So bully ball, pushing guys, get off me, swat the hands. I love that. Very almost AJ Brown esque in the way that he would he's not pushing off all the time, but just the subtle like hand movements
Yeah.
that
No,
create separation.
there were so many plays where I watched him like hand fight with the defender, and the defender ends up like getting shoved 4 and 5 yards backwards. Like he is a physical X receiver, and I think that's how he won so much in route, right? Like yes, it was his straight line speed, but he was just out bully balling people and creating that separation on his own, which led to him being open more than his release would have allowed him to be open.
I also thought, he just was really crisp at the stem of his route. You don't expect a guy 6'5" to be as twitchy as he is, as quick in and out of his breaks. And so I thought really his lateral side to side movement was much better than most guys his size. And, he seemed to have a good understanding of defensive manipulation, how to get the defender's hips turned, and great quickness, change of direction for his size. The hand fighting as well, and then you add in like he just really, I think, crushed it on slants, whip routes, crossers, out routes. Like those are the kind of routes that he just was consistently getting open in the short to intermediate area and racking it up. A lot of times with these big 6'5" archetype guys, you're seeing like 30 or 40 catches in a season. Well, he had 90. Right? So this is a PPR monster target hog, like possession receiver, which you don't often think of when you see a guy listed at 6'5", 212 pounds. So he can run routes. I was really impressed with that area of his game, and definitely some good functional athleticism in that area. So Um, Anything else you would add on the route running before we move on?
No, I think you just about covered it.
All right, so we're gonna move into our next category, which again you could summarize this category with the phrase ball skills, but it's gonna encompass traits like his contested catch, his hands, his catch radius, which is impacted by size and length, obviously, but also like, are you catching away from your frame? Can you catch it when it's high? Can you catch it when it's low? Like what? How much of a radius are you giving your quarterback that he can put the ball anywhere in that area and you're going to go get it? Body control, so contorting your body either to box out a defender, maybe catch a ball that's behind you. Ball tracking, so when the ball's thrown down the field or over your shoulder, are you keeping track of where it is, or are you getting kind of discombobulated with that? So all of that plays into ball skills. And Jackson, what did you notice here for Tet?
No, his ball skills are elite, right? That this was his strongest area by far on film. Just going down the line, I'm just going to read these off in tandem because I feel like it's that important. Like hands, I gave him an 8.5, which is above great. 9, I gave him for contested catch, elite. 9.5 for catch radius. 9 for body control. Like this was his strongest area. There were so many times on film that I watched him come back to a ball, reach around, grab a ball from behind him with one hand. He high points the ball so well. And man, if he gets anywhere near that sideline when the ball is thrown to him, he's getting a foot down. Like his catch radius is so good. Um, and if the ball's thrown to him, I never really saw any drops. Like he has such strong hands. He's got such good control of a body that is 6'5". Like you wouldn't think somebody at 6'5" would be able to have as much finesse as he does, but he really has a lot of finesse when it comes to playing the wide receiver position. Like he is an elite ball skills guy, and that's how he wins consistently. Like watching him, I saw why he had as many yards and catches as he did. It's because when you throw him the ball, he's coming down with it. Like even if he's not open, like if it's a contested catch situation, he's still out bullying the guy that's contested his catch. So I mean, this was such a strong area for him.
Yeah, I agree. I had similar scores across the board. I had 8.5 for hands, 9 for contested catch, which is incredible. 9.5 for catch radius. Again, when you're 6'5", but you got long arms, you're tracking the ball well. You can catch it high, you can catch it low. I mean, his catch radius really got put on display a lot too because his quarterback was not always putting the ball right on him. And so, sometimes some guys have to make the spectacular catch a little bit more than other guys. And he was asked to do that a lot, did it really well. The toe tap, like the body control on the sidelines to reach really far for a ball, but keep his feet in bounds, to box guys out, like the whole thing, contested catch. I gave him an 8 for ball tracking. I think physicality plays into this too. He had a 9.5 there. So, yeah, overall, really elite ball skills, and this is where he butters his bread. So I almost said breads his butter, but uh, either way, he's doing it right. This is his go to trait, I would say, and I mean that shouldn't come as a surprise at 6'5". I think I've already seen on Twitter some people calling him a contested catch merchant, talking about like his percentage of targets that were contested. And I think the lack of a release against press coverage does play into that some, but some of these guys are just so good at the contested catch and so good at like that the quarterback, when all else fails, it's like just throw it up to that guy and he's going to come down with it more often than not. And I think he earned that trust. And so sometimes a guy with elite contested catch ability and ball skills like this, people can almost talk about it like he's a knock, like it's a knock on him.
Yeah, that's what I
Um,
was that's what I was just about to say. We've seen so many people come out that have had this elite contested catch ball skill ability that haven't panned out in the NFL. And that's not what I think Tet McMillan is. Like
I mean,
that's
people still have Nikhil Harry PTSD, I think, but
yeah,
the 8 route running score really alleviates that concern for me. And we're going to talk about yards after catch in a minute. He's got a pretty good score for me there too. I'm not going to lie, I'm still concerned about the release against press coverage because I
yeah.
think a team is going to want to use him as an X receiver at the next level, and he's going to get pressed a lot. and so he needs to work on that area of his game, and that probably does factor into the percentage of his targets that were contested, and the at times perceived lack of separation that he was getting. But I think quarterback play factors into that too. And I'm not like I think it's a huge plus that somebody has elite ball skills. I'm not going to act like it's a bad thing that he has this really elite trait. So the next category that we need to get into is going to be the yards after catch. What did you see there, Jackson?
I thought he did a really good job of catching we mentioned this whole catching the ball with a plan in mind type of thing.
Hmm.
He did that really well for me. I gave him an 8 for yards after the catch, and I might have been able to give him an 8.5. Honestly, I really like his yards after the catch. There were so many plays where he would run a hook route, right? He just instinctually, when he caught that hook route, would feel with his hips like where the guy was on him, spin out of the tackle and run downfield for extra yardage. Um, he did that pretty consistently. There were so many times where he would just he is great in a phone booth, right? For not having quick feet, I guess, at the release package, he is actually really good after the catch, which was a little confusing to me because, like, where was that whenever you were trying to get a guy off balance at the line of scrimmage? But I thought he did really really well, and that again another really great grade for me.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I gave him a 7.5 in this area, and I even question whether that's high enough. So 7 is an NFL players, 8 is great by NFL standards. So I've got him somewhere between good to great yards after the catch. And I think maybe the reason that I didn't put it higher is because he's lacking some of that like elite twitchiness, elusiveness to make guys miss, and um, he's not the most explosive athlete. I think he's a long strider with good build-up speed.
Yeah,
And
I agree with
so, again, we talk about functional athleticism. So I think this plays into route running, this plays into everything, but it also plays into yards after catch. And so for his athleticism grades, I gave him a 7.5 for game speed, a 7.5 for burst, and an 8 for quickness. And even a lot of that is size adjusted. So like if a guy was 5'11" and 185 pounds and running like he does, I probably wouldn't give him an 8 for quickness. But
Yeah.
because he does what he does at 6'5", 212, I'm like, that's pretty great quickness for his size. So this is a little bit of a size adjusted thing for me. And I feel like he's definitely an above average athlete, but not like he's not this super explosive. I would say even when you compare him to guys like Rome and Marvin Harrison last year around a similar size, he's a little bit less bursty and explosive and quick than those guys were even. So it's close, but it's not, I wouldn't call him an elite. I mean,
No,
elite for his size,
I
maybe. It's
agree with
up
you.
there. It's good. It's not elite.
Yeah,
It's
no,
good.
I agree with you. I gave him a 7.5 for quickness. I felt like he starts off slow. I don't know if you noticed that. Like he doesn't start fast or twitchy at all, but he's got really good build-up speed. I think is the way I would describe it. Like once he gets to top speed, he's a threat downfield, but it takes a minute to get there. But again, like you said, like at 6'5", like
Hmm.
he does actually have some pretty good athleticism for a
I
receiver he
think
thinks he is.
it's going to be pretty similar to a lot of what you saw out of Rome last year, where like on tape he didn't look like the most explosive guy, but it's kind of deceptive because he has such long strides, and so he's actually probably going to run a lot faster at the combine than people might think from his tape. That's my prediction. Just similar, very similar to I think how a lot of people viewed Odunze last year, and so all that plays into his yards after catch. Like I don't think he's this, like I gave a 9 or a 10, I think, to Neighbors after the catch last year. He's not that, but he's very good for being a big guy. I kind of maybe a little bit of a comp for him is Drake London. Um,
Yeah, I
Drake
like that.
London is a big guy that's great in the short to intermediate game and better than you would think after the catch, but not the most explosive laterally or the biggest burner down the field. So yeah, I think Drake London is kind of a decent comp there for Tet McMillan. And so when you talk about him overall, I could read off some of Rupert's notes as well. He's not able to be on the show tonight, but he did scout Tet McMillan as well and gave him a grade. So said a lot of the same things that we said. He said release is a little underwhelming. Would not label him as a technician. Um, Said he flashed the ability to sink his hips low and explode out of breaks, but didn't do it as consistently as he would have liked. Hands are ridiculous. Body control is ridiculous. Ability surprised him and is a big part of his game. So he saw it pretty similarly to how we did. And when you look at our overall combined grades for him, what you're going to see, he came out at a 78.38. And that is pretty consistent with, it's lower than the big three guys last year, for example. So Rome, Marvin Harrison, Neighbors were all over an 80 last year, which so we're not putting him in that elite category, but it's a very good score. So that's within a point of guys like Adonai Mitchell, who we loved last year, Lad McConkey, who we were really high on, and on our grading scale, when you look at like the scoring outline, anybody from a 75 to a 79.9, so he falls in that on the upper end of that category, is fantasy starter. And from an 80 to an 84.9 is an elite fantasy producer. So he's kind of on the borderline between a fantasy starter and an elite fantasy producer, according to our grading scale there. And so I don't know. We're not saying that we dislike him. Don't hear us say that. We are saying we don't think he's in the same tier or caliber of prospect as Neighbors, Harrison, and Odunze were last year, who were all top 10 picks in the NFL draft, and we thought deserving of that.
Which is shocking because coming into it, you would have assumed that would be what we came away with based on consensus value, but it's not.
But he's not that far below those guys. Like I think Rome was at like an 81 for us last year, and Tet is at like a 78.5. So I mean, it's like 2.5, 3 points between them, which is not nothing. But we have him more in that range of like we were lower on Brian Thomas, but that range that was being drafted of Ladd, Worthy, Brian Thomas, Adonai, like that's kind of, if he was in last year's draft, that's where we would have had him, if that gives you a context for anything. So we don't dislike him. We think he's a first round player. And in this class, he may still be wide receiver one. Last year was kind of an outlier where there were a lot of really elite guys. But we're not like drooling over, this guy's elite. He's going to be a superstar. He could be, especially if he developed in the release against press coverage. I mean, if he had let me just look hypothetically. All right, if I were to go here, and I had him at a 78.38, and let's say I were to take that 5 that I gave him for a release and put it at an 8, that bumps his overall score all the way up to an 82.83. So, I mean, that's what it comes down to. We all three saw him really struggle in this area. That is a heavily weighted attribute for us, and especially at his archetype as an X receiver, and it's knocked his overall score down some. If he had a great release, he would be in that tier with those other guys that we talked about. But that's what it comes down to, is that we didn't give him a high score there, and I think that's what's really holding him back.
And I'll just say too, like we've also seen, let's call a spade a spade. We've seen guys come into the league with a bad release and get better at the release, right? So this is not an area that he can't work on, but it is knocking his overall grade.
Yep. And Brian says, I wonder if MHJ and Odunze's mediocre rookie seasons will make people careful with a guy like Tet this year. And I think that's a fair statement to make. I mean, those guys are similar archetype, big body. Like the NFL certainly is trending more towards the neighbors archetype of player. And I think there are less and less teams and offenses in the NFL right now that know how to use a guy that's a 6'3" plus traditional X receiver. Most of the top
Adunze is also.
receivers.
I was going to say
Go
Adunze
ahead.
is also on a team where he's in a loaded waters. Like his is kind of situational dependent too, though. I would say.
Sure. I mean, you got a rookie quarterback that struggled at times pretty heavily trying to find his way in the league, and you've got two other really good receivers on the same team. But yeah, I mean, I think it's fair because like Marvin Harrison Jr. should theoretically be in the ideal situation, and he has had a pretty subpar season, and so it's like, is he not as good as everybody thought that he was, or does the modern NFL just not know how to use a guy like that anymore, or is it really just that the Cardinals stink, and if he was in a different situation with a better coach or a better quarterback, maybe he'd be fine. But I could see it. I could see those guys because it's such a fresh, recent example of these 6'3" plus big bodied guys disappointing. I could see it scaring some people off. So,
Yeah.
all right. Well, that's enough about Tet McMillan. So, appreciate you guys sticking with us for this long. Uh, how many fantasy shows do you get on where you get 30 minutes in and we haven't done any self promotion? We don't usually do that. I forgot. I'm going to be
Not
honest.
us.
Uh, I mean, so shout out us, but we're if you stuck with us for this long, I will tell you, we have a couple things we would love for you to know about. One, we have a free Discord that we created just to get to know our listeners. It's not doesn't benefit us in any way other than just it creates a community, and we want you guys to feel like you're part of our community and kind of identify with us. But it's totally free. That link will be in the show notes. If you're listening on Twitter right now or X, you can find it at the link in our bio. We also have a website, CouchScouts.com, where we have some premium membership subscriptions where you can come on and join the Couch Scouts. And rookie season is the best time to do that. I would say that rookie content and analysis is our bread and butter as a company. We crush it, in my humble opinion, maybe not so humble opinion, with the rookie content. We're going to release a really detailed rookie guide covering 60 or 70 plus prospects with the same kind of breakdown that you heard here on the show tonight for Tet, where we would draft them, what our film grade is, all that kind of stuff. It's going to be the ultimate cheat sheet to your fantasy draft. You can get that by being a member of the Couch Scouts. We're going to have bonus podcast episodes every single week just for our members where we cover some of the deeper names. So Tet McMillian is not a name that people are going to sleep on, but Kyron Lacey might be. So if you want to know what our thoughts are, detailed breakdown of Kyron Lacey, join the Couch Scouts. We're going to have that tonight on the bonus podcast. And a lot of other perks as well. We've got an all 22 film room, so you can get in there on your own. You can check out all of what we have to offer. I think the prices are super reasonable, and we would love for you guys to come join the Couch Scouts. So with that being said, my name's Matt Cooper. You can find me on social media at Couch Scouts FF. This is Matt Jackson. You can find him at Devi Matt. And we appreciate any likes, comments, subs, all that kind of stuff to just help people find our channel. And we will be seeing you guys not next week, right? Because next week is Christmas, so we will not be recording. We will not be recording next week, but we'll see y'all in a couple of weeks. We hope y'all have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and we'll see you in about 2 weeks. Have a good evening.